Okay, welcome back. Now, we've gone ahead and scanned a couple of projects. We scanned a couple of source code repositories, we scanned a couple of artifact repositories, and in the previous videos, we looked at the very tactical results. We looked at the SBOM, we looked at the OpenSSF scorecard. What I want to do next is show you how you can leverage the product to actually really sort of change the scope or widen the scope of sort of how we're analyzing these projects, right? So here we've done the scans. Let's go to artifact security. And here we've got two areas that we'll look. We'll look at generated artifacts, which represents the WebGoat artifacts that we scanned. We can also look at the source code. We looked at Nextcloud bookmarks and Nextcloud mail. And what we can do here, if we look at the WebGoat artifact, is we can look at what we call a delivery bill of materials. Here's the SBOM, by the way. This is the SBOM that we mentioned earlier as we were looking at the results of the scan. And here we're really focused on all of the dependencies that were discovered, outlining how they're licensed and outlining their vulnerability profile. But if we take a step back and we look at what we call the delivery bill of materials, we'll get a slightly wider aperture in terms of sort of what is going on here. Now, what we do with the delivery bill of materials is we're assuming that you're going to deploy this artifact, and we're going to analyze it as such. Now, in this case here, we don't have access to your build system. We don't have access to your CD system. We don't have access to an environment that you're going to deploy to. All of which, if you were to integrate this as part of your process, we would. But here we don't. So we're just looking at the artifact itself, and we're saying, all right, from a vulnerability analysis perspective at a very high level, it failed a number of policies, right? So by policy, there shouldn't be any low, high, critical, medium vulnerabilities, and there should also be a continuous check for vulnerability setup. As you remember, I didn't set up a continuous scan. And so ultimately, you can see here, we failed the critical because there's 3 critical vulnerabilities here. We're also going to look at things like secret scanning, and there aren't any failures here. All these tests passed. Same thing with license scanning. Again, we're passing these things through a policy filter to better understand how the results of the data that we collected match up against a policy. And as you can see here, we've got a couple of medium and high severity licenses that we found. Doesn't mean that you can't use the artifact. It just means that we found them, and we should, get a disposition on those failures. Now, if we were to look back and go back to artifact security again and look at some of our source code ad hoc scanning, what you'll see if we look at the same delivery bill of materials is you'll see we've added source code here because we're actually scanning source code. And this source code also, that repo also had some artifacts in it as well. And so look, we start with the OpenSSF scorecard and the pass fail here to get very specific about what passed and what failed. We look at the Git security posture. Things like bot users shouldn't be able to merge code. In this case, they can. We look at the static code analysis pieces in terms of, from a metadata perspective, what tests passed versus what tests failed, and then the details around why they failed. We do the same thing with code security, where we start looking at some of the other static code analysis pieces to make sure that the actual source code is. Now, as an example here, there was a SEMGREP scan done where there was a medium severity finding. So we see that. We also do the same thing with license scans and secret scans. We also look at the artifacts that are generated here, right? And so again, we scan the artifacts, and because we found an artifact in this repo, we've scanned it, and obviously it failed, mainly just because there was a as you can see there, it's got a 93 score, so overall it's pretty safe. But one test failed based on the fact that there's a low severity vulnerability. And ultimately, you can go down the path of understanding those things and those items in terms of how these things rank against a set of policies that we've put in place. So this is just yet another view of how this either repo or artifact stacks up against industry standard policies. And if we were to look, at these things and understand, here's a list of all the policy failures, right? So again, There was some failures around the SAST policy. There were some failures around OpenGrep and the scan we did there. There were some CVEs that we found when we did the scan. So all of these things are there to help you better understand not just the raw results, but how these things stack up in terms of the overall security posture of the repo or the artifact that you're scanning. I wanted to bring you through that piece of it. My next video, we're going to get into monitoring and managing CVEs, but hopefully this is helpful in terms of an alternative view of how to view the data.